All right, let's go to some other issues. Snap border closures, regional COVID flare-ups have all spelt chaos for farming families with children at boarding school. Hundreds of boys and girls from country New South Wales who go to the schools along the Victorian-Murray border face the prospect of being unable to get to campus or back to home, whichever way it goes, during the holiday period. And it's all because the existing Victorian border permit system fails to count education as a valid reason for entering the state. For more on this, I'm joined from Canberra by the Minister for Regional Education, amongst many other things, National Senator Bridget McKenzie. I mean, if education
Great to be with you,
isn't...
Peter.
Great to have you on the show, Bridget. If education isn't essential, if education isn't a reason to cross the borders, then what is? I know you had a roundtable on the issue today. What can you tell us?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I couldn't agree more. I think, and you just were talking about young people's rights with your previous guest. I think young people in our home state of Victoria, but right across the country, have been doing it tough. They've had almost a year being homeschooled by their parents. In many instances, that's a good experience, but in many it's not. And our boarding students are particularly doing it tough. We saw during last year, when it came to school holidays, we were having quarantine arrangements for 13-year-olds in capital cities without parental oversight, and there was just a whole raft of anomalies as different states had different regimes, if you like, for students getting home. We've got about 1,600 students that don't board in their home state, and so getting across borders like New South Wales, Victoria is incredibly difficult. I had an email from a mother in Victoria last night at about 8:30 at night saying they just received notification from the Victorian government that their son wasn't going to get an exemption. Victorian students weren't going to get an exemption for them to come home this weekend. It's an excellent weekend from the New South Wales Agricultural College that they are studying at. And so they've got from 8:30 last night to 8 a.m. this morning to somehow find alternative arrangements for their kids. And this has been going on for 18 months. So I held a roundtable today with parents from across the country, principals and boarding schools and our cross-border commissioners to really talk about what some of the issues were. Heard tragic instances of a 13-year-old being rushed to emergency in Toowoomba, and his parents, who are in Narrabri, New South Wales, 450k away, were not allowed to head to hospital to support him during that time. I mean, it's just crazy. It's not compassionate and it's not working. So I'm seeking to really develop a nationally consistent framework so that parents, schools and students aren't having to seek one-off exemptions from health ministers in their state jurisdictions, but can have confidence that when we do have these short, sharp lockdowns in capital cities around the country, that they will know how they can get home, quarantine safely, have COVID-safe travel plans and the like, so that we're not putting people at risk, but that they can have confidence that they can care for their children when they need to.
Yeah, well, just a couple of thoughts from me. I mean, first of all, there's no short, sharp lockdowns in Victoria. We've been in lockdown for this year. We've only had a couple of weeks out of freedom. Forget this idea it's number 6. It's been one long number 3 since about February. But also, how do we get to the situation, Bridget? We're 18 months into this pandemic. I know you don't run schools. That's the state government. And you're not the one that signs off on these health approvals to cross borders. Again, they're state governments. But how do we get to the situation? We've had all of this hollow language about mental health. Every political leader gets up and talks about mental health. How do we get to a situation where you're still fighting and having these roundtables, trying to work out a way that these kids can get home? The case you just talked about at 8 o'clock last night, they're still refused. This child is still refused the right to go home to their parents. How do we accept that? Why can't we fix that? Why do we have to have more meetings to talk about the bleeding bloody obvious?
No, I hear you, Peter. I've been the minister for a few weeks, and within 2 weeks of being given this portfolio, I'd written to state education ministers raising this issue, knowing that we're about 4 or 5 weeks off the next school holiday period. And in between that, now we've had these disastrous COVID outbreaks, which have really exacerbated the problem. I can understand if you are the health minister of any given state and you've got millions of your citizens in lockdown, the mental health and also the economic toll that's taking, that a couple of hundred boarding school students in your home state may not be your absolute priority. That is why we need to have something in place that is just a nationally consistent set of framework that we can just press go on. And as a health minister, you don't have to be signing off on one-off exemptions for every single one of these students. They will just know what the plan is for them to get home when they need it. And their parents will know. It is a simple way to take that to-do list off a very busy state health minister's task list because they've got a lot of other different things to consider. So over coming week, I'll be engaging with state health ministers and state education ministers so that we can actually get this sorted. We've been able to do it with the ag workers piece and we've been able to do it with freight moving interstate. And I think, Peter, as you see sort of this Delta strain and how it's quite localised, it's not just going to be state borders, it's going to be borders between certain LGAs that are being locked down and, Western New South Wales, for instance, those kids needing to get home in a COVID-safe manner. I heard a terrible thing today about a young female boarder who had some serious mental health issues, needed to get home out of Sydney. And now it took 2 weeks for her to get her exemption and she had to stay in the boarding house away from her family and support network. It's just not good enough. We need to do better.
No, it's not. And I know you take it seriously,
I'm committed to making
Bridget.
that.
I know you take it seriously. I know you've just been in the portfolio and thank God you're there now to fix this stuff. But we can make accommodations for Hollywood stars. I mean, Zac Efron's just flown back into Australia for another movie. We've got the AFL millionaires able to move all around the country. And this idea that kids can't get home, I just find not good enough. But thank God you're going to take it up. Thank you, Bridget. Thanks for your time. Have a great weekend.
You too, Peter.